right. Good morning, everybody. Again, welcome to everybody watching by the internet. Can you do me a favor? Can you put your hands together? Come on and welcome all of my friends on the platform today. My most favorite person in the whole wide world, it really is true, Pastor Jen Matthews, and then Mike and Wanda Nicholas, two of the most incredible people that you will ever meet. If you don't know them, you should. So they're going to stand down front today, sign autographs and all that kind of stuff. You should come by and get to know them. But before we dive into all the content we're going to talk about today, I want to give you a little sneak peek of next week. We begin our rerun series. It's one of our most favorite series around here at Cultivate. See, we believe in summer being a lot of fun. Summer, church is fun all the time at Cultivate, but summer especially is a good time. How many of you have been a part of our rerun series before? Anybody? A few of you. Some of you are going to be in for a treat. It's the easiest time to come to church, and here's the goal behind this series, and here's what we want you to know. It is a super simple series where we watch television and eat Little Debbie cakes on Sundays in church. I mean, you can't get better than that. And so I know there's two thoughts. Some of you are going, that sounds like my kind of Sunday. And my friends would like that too, and that's the goal. It's so that you can easily bring your friends to church that may not go any other time. You can say, look, we're going to watch The Office and King of Queens and Everybody Loves Raymond and Home Improvement. Like, we're going to watch TV, eat some popcorn, Little Debbie snacks, and drink Cokes. Like, it's going to be awesome. And they can say, well, I'll give that a try. And then there's the other thought where we're going, well, that's not spiritual at all. But I can tell you this, there's two things very spiritual about it. Number one, Jesus told us to go and to compel people to come in. He said go and get them in the hedges. I don't know why they're in the hedges, but even go to the hedges and dig them out. You know what I'm talking about? He said go and get people, like do whatever it takes to get them to church. So that's very spiritual. And then number two, we're going to take biblical principles out of God's word. So I promise you, you're going to be challenged through that series as we begin that next week. So invite your friends. If you come alone, you missed it. If you came by yourself, if you come alone, you're missing it. The goal is to bring somebody. So if you got a minivan, just roll through the neighborhood, open the door and say, psst, come on. We're going to church, Little Debbie's and that whole deal, they'll get in, I promise you. But today, we are in our final week of our Summer Sunday series, and every week has been different. So, for example, last week in our Alabaster campus, Pastor Jen shared on the platform, and then here in Columbiana, Matt Powers brought an incredible word last week. And if you've missed any of those, then you can go online at cultivatechurch.tv, you can go to Facebook, you can go to YouTube, you can download the Cultivate app. Tons of places, but you can see all of that. And so today, we're going to be talking through the big idea of our talk today is about our story and about our life. And I'm talking to Jen and to Mike and Wanda about just what God's done in their life and just the journey of it. Because I think sometimes when we come into church sometimes and we see people, like you see Jen every week leading worship and you think, that's easy for her. That's what she does. She spoke in Alabaster last week and somebody asked me, they said, how much help did you give to Jen in her preparation for last Sunday? I said, none at all. I said, the only thing I had to do was just keep her in the country because she was scared to death, like she was ready to go. You may think this is easy, but she's introvert. She's not an extrovert. So for her to sit here today is like nerves. And so even for Wanda today, I want you to give a special hand. Come on, like do this for Wanda. Because I learned right before church at 9 o'clock today that when I asked Mike a few weeks ago, maybe the beginning of the month, if they'd be interested in doing this, Mike said, oh yeah, it'd be great. And what Wanda told me that he forgot to say is that when he asked her, she said, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. She said a week later, she asked Mike how I took it. And Mike said, oh, he's excited. And she said, excited that we're not doing it? He said, oh, well, he didn't tell her that he told me yes. So she sits here today very reluctantly, but she did an incredible job at 9 o'clock. So here's the deal. We're going to go through this today, and here's why this matters. Is 1 Peter 3:15 teaches us this. The Bible teaches us that we are to be prepared at all times to give a reason for the hope that we have. There's power in a story. You have a story to share. You didn't always have it all together like you do today. I know everybody in here, you're saved, so your marriage is perfect. Come on, you're all spiritual people. I know you didn't always have it together before like you do today. And the truth is we're all still on a journey to today. None of us are perfect. So on this platform today, we're not portraying perfection. But the Bible teaches us to be prepared to give a reason for the hope that we have, our story. We love a story. We watch a movie for a story, a TV show for a story. You read a book for a story. You listen to those podcasts because you love that story. There's nothing better than to listen to a 6 or 7-year-old tell a story, because parents, I want you to know, they tell on everything in your life. Come on, a good story. So I just want to sit back today, and it's like we're all sitting around our kitchen table. Pretend it's 1990 and we still do that. Like we all gather around the kitchen table, and we should do that more these days. And we're just having a conversation. And so I want to talk to these guys about just their journey and where they've been, because we may think, well, they've got it all together. They love Jesus. I see them every week. They lead in church. And the truth is, their journeys are very different from that. As a matter of fact, Jen, I'll start with you. People see you lead worship every week. You're the pastor's wife, so obviously that means you're the pastor's wife, whatever that means. It just means I'm lucky. But here's the deal. It hasn't always been that way. You grew up in church, and you had a Christian family. I did not. I didn't grow up in church with a Christian household. You loved God for most of your life, were involved and attached to things, but then later in your teenage years kind of went another direction. Kind of give us an overview of how you got there. Like, what was the journey like of growing up in church? And then probably, like many of us in here would probably be able to say, yeah, I did that when I was a kid, and then some things happened in life. What did that look like for you?
Well, for me, my personality is naturally one to follow rules. And so my parents always had us in church, so I did what I was told, and just really went out of obedience. Over time, as I got older, like I really loved it. I was involved. I enjoyed church. I thought I understood it all. And just over time, as when you get older, you start kind of seeing behind the scenes of things. And just it seemed like consistently relationships I had that I kind of held to a high standard, or I really looked up to, looked for guidance, whatever, they would fall or be real hypocritical. And leaders I really looked up to they just were failing. It seems like every time I turned around, somebody else was going crazy. And I just began to think that, in the church, there was kind of a standard, we're all trying to be like Jesus. And back in the day, the way I grew up, you just pretended like you were anyways. You came in with your church face and your church clothes, and they were clothes I wouldn't touch all through the week, and you just did things you wouldn't do all week, but you were your Sunday self. And I just thought, when you're outside of church, you don't have to do that. People can just be people. And I thought, that just sounds a lot more attractive to me. Like, I just want to know what's real. My personality is very black and white, and I just need what's real. So that's when I made a decision to just go with what seemed a little more direct. And left church.
So in other words, I think this is common for many of us, that probably most of us would say at some point that we've experienced. Number one, we go into a place where we assume that everybody's got it together. So principle number one is to know that nobody's got it all together, and we're all on this journey together, every single one of us. So from here to the parking lot, whatever, we're all in the same spot trying to figure this thing out day after day. And then secondly, understanding one thing is that when we put people or personalities above God, we're making a mistake. And that's why we're very careful around here. We say Cultivate Church is not a personality-driven church. You guys don't come to church because you know who's going to be speaking that week or leading worship or teaching your kids, because it's different every single week, because it's a team. We're all partners in this thing. And so from the platform all the way around the church, we're all in this thing together. So it's not personality-driven. But the challenge for us, I think, sometimes is we do get our eyes locked on other people, and we try to think that that's what we need to be or how we need to be. But God actually told us himself. He said, hey, I'm jealous. The number one rule is you got no other gods, nothing above me. I've got to be first and number one. And so I think a principle for us to walk away from understanding, hey, this is what caused me to walk away from truth in my life, and what I knew to be true in a relationship with God was all because I was watching people, and I felt this fear of being perfect. Some of you felt that even today walking into Cultivate, and you don't have to feel that, but you beat the kids in the car, you threaten them with every inch of their life, you're almost divorced before you walk in the door. But when you walk in, man, praise the Lord. I mean, some of you did that, and then you started serving. You're greeting other people. Isn't it a great day? We're so glad to see you. I'm going to kill you when we get home. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't feel that in reality, knowing, hey, we're all in that same boat. We all walk through that. So let's keep perspective clearly. And then, Wanda, you guys, total different story in a sense that you weren't in church just a few years ago at Cultivate, found us at Cultivate Church, and then some things started changing. And Wanda's being so brave to come up here and talk today. And I encourage you guys to watch online from Alabaster from this morning, because they're talking about things like how many times should a married couple have sex, how frequently. So Wanda didn't want to answer that today, so she's at least getting out easy. But you're going to want to tune into Alabaster, okay, later on this afternoon. But Wanda, tell us a little bit of your story, like how you guys, I mean, you walked into the church, and it feels like from day one, you guys were just connected and just moving and going. And I want to say this publicly, we're sitting in this room today largely in part because of Mike and Wanda, because they started coming to church, and then everybody started coming with them, and then everybody said, we'd love to have a church in Columbiana, and we prayed, and God said yes, and so here we are, all because of you guys making some decisions in your life. So how did you get here? What did it look like before you walked in the doors of Cultivate?
So it wasn't all that pretty. Before we found Cultivate, we did church, what we call do church. We would find a church, would never get connected. We'd go 6 months, a year, get unconnected, move on with our life, find another church. But the year that we found Cultivate, our marriage was not at a good point. We were about to the point of giving up, but we thought we would do church again. So a friend led us to Cultivate. We started coming. We got involved this time, served, went through Roots, started through small groups. But before I knew it, God was working in our lives, not on our marriage, but on us. And I felt like he had to work in us and through us before he could change our marriage. And he had to be in our hearts before he could do anything within us. So that's where our journey started. It's still a work in progress every day. It's not perfect at all, but God's in the middle of it, and it's just so much better.
Wow. Think about that when you think, number one, she said we were going to do church again. So we were going to check that box. We were going to go. We were going to show up, and we were going to do church. But the reality was, you were in a place where doing church wasn't going to get it. I mean, you were in a place where you said, our marriage is not good. Like, we're at the point of giving up, and we need something else. But I love the fact that you said it was, you connected with people, and you started serving, and you dove in. You didn't just do church or come to church, but you became the church, really. And so, Mike, what did that feel like for you? When you guys started coming in here, and what was going through your mind when you walked in to Cultivate and you began this journey?
Well, I did the same thing. I was like, we're going to come do this Sunday thing, and we're going to leave, and we're just going to check that off the box and everything. But something grabbed hold of us that day, and like I said, our marriage was in a bad spot at that time. But I think once we started realizing that we loved people and we loved God, and then we brought God into our lives individually first. I had to have him here first before I could have him between us. And once we got that going, it was just amazing. It's like we're dating all over again. 21 years of marriage, and she's like my girlfriend again. So, it's been huge. God has just touched us so much between the church, and not just on the Sunday mornings, it's through the week too. That's been so awesome.
That's awesome. Some of you just said, that's what we're missing, sweetheart. We need Jesus, and we need to date again. We need that. And I love this because some of you don't know this. I didn't know this till several years later, after Mike and Wanda had already been a part of the church for so long, that the first Sunday they pulled in the parking lot, they said, nah, we're not going to do this, and turned around and went home. And then the next Sunday said, no, we need to go back. We need to give it a try. That their friend that suggested, so they wouldn't have lied to us, so they did. They came back and walked in the doors. But there's such important nuggets of information here for all of us, principles, that it literally is. It's not just using church as a checkbox. It's what we put into it. The Bible actually teaches us that if we draw near to the Lord, he says he will draw near to us. So it's literally, when I take a step toward him, he takes a step toward me. And so if we're in this environment and we're going, you know what, I just don't feel any change. I don't feel a change in my marriage, in my relationships, or in my job, or I just don't feel a change in my life, like I'm connecting with God. And I would just dare for you to ask yourself this question, well, how many steps have you taken forward recently? How many steps are you moving toward him so that he would move toward you? It's a relationship, and I think that's incredibly important. And then from your perspective, Jen, like coming from kind of hurt in church, from that kind of bad experience in church, and now trying to figure this out for yourself, what brought it all back? I mean, today we see you lead worship and we see you active in the church, but how did you get there? It was a journey.
Yeah, it was. I really don't know what to say other than it was God that started changing stuff in my heart, because my eyes kind of began to be open about where I was and what my life looked like. And I just kind of realized that the friends that I had around me it was just all really empty, that I wasn't really going anywhere with my life. And I just started to have a lot of questions. And so I took a step and I was living downtown Birmingham and moved back with my parents out in the country. So I was kind of in my own world out there. And while I was there, I got tricked into playing bass at a church, at my parents' church. I'd been on my mom's Sunday school prayer list for long enough to where they knew that I played music, so they called. And I told them they were crazy, but I ended up there anyways out of this long story. But Brandon was actually there at the same time doing the same thing, filling in, helping him get this youth band started. So
I wasn't on your parents' prayer list, though.
He wasn't. He wasn't.
I'm clarify that one.
No. I was the only outreach case. And Brandon was there kind of in between some situations. So we met there, and I don't know what they were talking about one night. It was probably about a month into being at this church. They continued conning me into coming back. It was really weird. But this one night, I was in the middle of this youth group and just started bawling my eyes out. And I'm just thinking, oh, get it together. You look like a moron. But not because I was like 21 or something in the middle of all these teenagers, and I'm thinking, this isn't even for you. But I was just crying, and I'm not that person. If you know me, I'm just not that person. But I just kept feeling just junk come out, so I didn't stop it. Like, I just kept crying, and literally that was the day that I just felt it all come out. I was just done.
Yeah. I think about, when I hear her story every time, I always think about the story of the prodigal son. And maybe some of you are familiar with that, out of Luke chapter 15, where literally a son just said, hey, Dad, I want all my stuff today. And in the tradition of the day, they would save a nest egg, and the son would get an inheritance when Dad died. And you didn't ask for it until Dad was gone. But this son said, basically, Dad, I want it now. Like, you're as good as dead. I'd rather have the money. And his dad, being a loving father, said, it's not the best decision, but if that's what you want to do, son, you take it. And the son takes it all, runs away, and he spends it, and he ends up with nothing. He's like literally homeless, has nowhere to go. And then he looks back to the father, and the father says, come home. To come back. And he opens him, with open arms, he comes running back. And I think about that story of grace and redemption, that no matter really how far you've gone, God is always working a way to get us back. God knew that there would be a call. God knew that there would be a bass guitar that needed to be played. God knew it would take the right person to ask the question. God always knows what he's doing. And so I would kind of challenge us today to really think about that for our own life. Like, what's the barrier that's in our life where God is calling us to something else, or maybe God is calling us to something greater? Regardless today, really, whether you've got a relationship with God, maybe you don't, and there's some barrier that's keeping you from making that decision, or we've got a relationship with God and God's calling us to the next level, but we're just reserved and trying to keep it from happening. But there's something that God's calling us to. It just takes being available and doing it and trusting God in the process. And so for you guys, tell us a little bit about, so what was the change? So we know that you kind of started, okay, we need church again. Church became more than checking the box. You guys become very active. And so then what happens in your house? Like, what changes start to take place? What are the little things that you're doing at home that makes things different, that helps your relationship to grow? Because obviously, thankfully, you're still here. You're still married. You're dating again, Mike. You're excited again. So what was the change? What happened?
Thank you. So I think the change was just God changed our mind and our thoughts and our actions, in that when it flowed over into our marriage, it was awkward. I mean, here we had been married 16 years, and we didn't have God in our life. We didn't know what it was like to pray together or do devotion together. So we were working on that together with God's help, and now it's awkward not to do it, not have a devotion plan between the two of us or pray in the morning. But that didn't happen overnight, because I went reluctantly. But we remind each other, and we help each other, and remind each other to keep God first in both of our lives, so he stays centered in our marriage. So for me, that was the change.
And it's also helped us when we take our marriage outside the house, too, because not only is it in the house now, but we go outside the house. And I learned that there's a lot of other people going through the same crap I'm going through. And it's helped me relate to other people, whether I know them or not. And that's what I love about it. I love about just praying for God and then loving on people.
That's awesome. And I love what you said, because somebody in here just took a deep breath. Like in your relationship, you're going, wow, I thought it was awkward, but I thought maybe I didn't love Jesus enough. Like somebody was in here going, I don't know what's wrong with me, like to pray and to do the devotions, and it's not there. But it is true. It's going through that awkward, like, how do we navigate this and how do we do this? And it may look different for every person and every life in here and the way that you do life, but the reality is when you work through it and make these little small steps, these principles in your life, it suddenly feels awkward not to do it. I mean, those are some changes that you guys made specifically. Mike, I remember, you talking about just in general, like even at work, and some things that were just different at work. Would the guys at the office know? Because some of you may not know this, but Mike is in a very competitive field. Mike clobbers high prices on vehicles all across Birmingham, Shelby County, and surrounding areas. So I can tell you he'll take care of you. But Mike may have been known as a pretty hard businessman at one point. Mike, what's the change at work? So it's through your marriage, now bleeding over into the workplace.
Work was rough. It's a dog-eat-dog business. There's a lot of cussing. There's a lot of fighting. They're literally fighting sometimes. It's been a rough, tough job, but I've noticed a change in my life in the last 3 or 4 years where I feel a little bit more empathy for somebody, and I actually know how to talk to somebody a little bit different. Instead of cussing somebody out, maybe I need to talk to them a little bit, and it's been a lot different. Maybe I should do. Definitely. We're just talking across the table, right? It's rough. I mean, I'm not perfect. I still screw up at work. I still screw up bad at work, but I know God's with me now, and I pray about it a little bit more. And one of the biggest things at work is, and these guys, I freak some of them out sometimes, is when we all going through something at work, is we're all going through something at some time. But every once in a while, we'll just stop and say, hey, let's pray about that. And we literally get into a sales office and 4 of us will sit there and pray about it. And that's unheard of in the car business.
That's awesome.
Well, it's unheard of in business.
So Wanda, what is that? When you hear that, obviously you're not there, but I know that you probably have heard some stories and you've had Mike, you've seen him in his perfect form there. What do you think when you hear that? Would you have ever guessed that would have happened?
No, I've seen a change in Mike at work, just the patience, and it's not coming home angry all the time. And when he mentions that, even when he hurt his leg, that they all come together and prayed for him before his surgery, that's something 3 years ago, 4 years ago, before we started Cultivate, I don't think they would have done that.
Yeah.
And so it just warms my heart to hear that.
That's awesome. And here's the thing about it for all of us, because I know some of us still think sometimes, man, I wish that would happen for me, or that could never happen for me, or how do I get there? But the Bible actually teaches us. It says in 2 Corinthians 5:16 and 17, here's what it says. It says, at one time, we thought of Christ merely from a human point of view. And I think that's Scripture telling us our viewpoint sometimes of just how we view this thing. And I think about it's stepping into church and we're going to do church again. We're going to check that box. Or I grew up in church and I know what the rules are, so we'll just kind of follow what we know. We see it from that human point of view, but it says how differently we know him now. Like when I've encountered him, and it's not I know about him, but how I know him. He starts changing everything about us, how differently now. That means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone and a new life has begun. It doesn't matter. Any person who says yes to Jesus, there's a change that takes place in our life. And so you walk through this, you had this moment of change and you experienced God, and that began to really snowball everything in your life. Literally, Jen and I met in May of 2008, and we were married in December of 2008. So I watched this entire process. So she went from, that life to she's a pastor's wife, like overnight, like shocker. And so tell me some things that you did to make those hard decisions. You started cutting some stuff out, making some changes to move forward. What were some of those changes to escape the stuff?
Well, first off, I had moved away, so that was kind of step one, but I got sick of declining phone calls all the time, so I went and changed my phone number, and I deleted my Facebook and just started over. And I can tell you that was the most freeing thing I've ever done in my life. I got to just erase, and nobody knew where to find me at all, so I just got to start over with the people I wanted in my life that I knew were going to build me up instead of constantly fighting against what I had in my life before. And that was probably the biggest.
Yeah, I can specifically remember that day. She came by my house and she said, hey, here's my new phone number. And I said, why do you have a new phone number? And she said, well, because I'm starting over. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, I don't want anybody from yesterday to be able to get a hold of me today. She said, I'm starting a new life and I don't need anything dragging me back to where I used to be. And I thought, man, how incredible and how much of a sacrifice. Because you know how big of a sacrifice it is to go, I need to cut some stuff out. I need to make some changes. There's some stuff in my life that's not healthy, that's holding me back, that's not good for me. And I need to be able to push some of that stuff, out of my life. And so I think about for us today, and what does that mean? Like, what would it be for you? Like today, if you were to identify a few things in your life that you felt like you needed just to cut out to be able to make a step farther in your relationship with Christ? Would it be relationships or people? Would it be something that's in sin that's holding you back? Would it be something that, that you feel like if I let go of this, I'll be a total different person? And I think that's one of the greatest fears that you ever had, was that you would become somebody different than who you are. And if you all know my wife, okay, just in this month alone, she's had black hair, red hair, strawberry hair, blonde hair, and this is going to change. I'm just letting you know. I've seen pink hair, purple hair. I mean, it's just who she is. And so in church sometimes, I think for us, if we were all honest, we're afraid that when we say yes to Jesus, we're going to lose us. Like we have to conform to something that's not us. And I'm not talking about that we're not supposed to get rid of sin in our life and become conformed to Christ. Absolutely. But in who God created us to be, we don't lose us. So do you ever feel like what it's cost you, what you've given up, has cost you more than you wanted to spend? Or did you lose who you were in this process?
I really don't. And being able to look back on who I was and all the things that I've said no to since then, it's almost like the yeses I get to say now are so much more, because the more I've become who I was supposed to be, purposed to be, doors just open and your personality opens more, who you are opens more, to where there's no trade-off. I remember all of my days now, and that's a good feeling. And I know that that's what she means. Some of you are going, I'm not sure if this is spiritual or what she means, but yeah, she means that was not spiritual. That's real life. You're more present of mind. You've got the Spirit of God behind. It's just a more purposeful living. So now it's bigger than it ever was, and that's what I was terrified of the most, because that's the whole reason I left church in the beginning, was becoming this thing that was legalistic or judgy or whatever, the case may be. And I wanted to remain me. I didn't want to be in a business suit with teased out hair and need to go to piano lessons. That's to me what a pastor's wife was. And I was like, I just don't want to be that. Some of you grew up in church. You know what she's talking about. You had to play the piano. You had to have the hairdo. I mean, it's just, Yeah. And I mean, I feel like I'm more me now than I ever have been, because it's bigger and more. But that's cool, though. Like, if you got that hair and you play that piano, like, that's cool, too. Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, that's good, too. But the reality is, here's the thing. It's being authentic and knowing that God created you and God gifted you and God's called you. And so you're never the best version of yourself until you just let God let you be all that He created you to be. It's in God's creation. And so what I mean by that is that when you say yes to Jesus, all the qualities that God gave you they're just illuminated. They're able to be used for God in the right way. So the creativity and the heart and the passions, it all comes out in the way that God intended for it to be. And so for you, if you're ever feeling like, I just haven't connected, like I don't know what's missing, there's something about this that's just not complete, it may very well be that you're just doing it all in your own self, and you're doing it the best you can with what you've got. But when you let God step in, God begins to transform everything about us, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. God can help us be the best version of ourselves. And it really is what we mean by living life on purpose. He gives us that purpose to live this thing out. And so Mike and Wanda, you guys around here may know this, but they actually lead now our small groups. We have about 42 small groups this summer, and so they organize those and coach those of you who lead those groups. And it is weird to think that you guys would have
just done church a few years ago to walking in and now leading church. But you said something earlier that I think is important. You both talked about plugging in and the relationships. And now I think about the factor that you're leading something that leads relationships and connections in our church. So tell me about the importance that you think that has and that plays a role in the health of your growth in Jesus. From the moment you come in and say, yeah, we're going to do church, we're going to be there, but now understanding diving in and building relationships and the power of small groups and stuff. As a matter of fact, I believe the first thing that you guys were really connected to or involved in was with Mike. I think Wanda drugged you to a small group, and that's how you begun this process. So tell us the importance of that.
Well, that first one, she said, we need to go to a small group. And I'm like, I don't know the Bible. I ain't going there with them people. And so we went to Friday Night Funs. I said, Friday Night Fun, I think that's what it's called. And I thought, well, I can do Friday Night Fun. It's food, it's games, and everything else. We walk in. Here I am, 50 years old. We walk in. It's probably mid-30s, high 20s with babies running around everywhere. And I'm like, this is not for me. But I had we played charades that night, had a blast. I watched the house get destroyed, which freaked me out, but they had fun, and we just kept going. Then one night after a men's small group, because I started going to more small groups then because I enjoyed them, Brandon held me after class one night. I thought, uh-oh, what did I do? He said, I think you'd be a good person to lead small groups. And I was like, you don't know who you're talking to. And we did. But then I had to get some help in it, though. But small groups, if you're not plugged in a small group or just meeting other people, you're missing out. Because I tell you, those are so important.
So what did it do? In other words, because I know you're reserved anyway. You're kind of like Mike's going to knock Wanda down to talk to you. You know what I mean? That's how this goes here. So what was in that relationships? What did you find the value? Because now Wanda come in and she said, "Yeah, Mike's going to lead that. It's cool." Then Wanda said, "You know what? I think I want to do that too because Mike's a mouth and I'm the administration, so it balances each other out." But what did that do for you guys in the growth and development in your marriage and in your work? The whole life change you've experienced, you said a lot of it hinged on just relationship.
Oh, yeah. It made us more accountable, accountable for ourselves, accountable to other people. People were depending on us. But when he first said that he was going to do it, he dragged me along, kicking and screaming. I was like, what are you thinking? We can't do that. Yeah. But over time, we've met some of the most awesome people, and I love seeing the small groups grow and helping people and hearing stories. People message us and tell us how great the small group went, or nobody showed. I had one and nobody showed, and I think in small groups, I had a fear of even leading a small group because I had to pray. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, so I'm not going to lead a small group because I couldn't pray out loud in front of people. And I struggled with that for the longest time. And finally, I prayed about it and dove in.
And it's made a change.
And it's made a change in everything that we've done.
So quickly before we're done, what would you say? What would you guys say to us today that maybe we're here and we're on that fence, or we just need to go to that next level. We know that we need to get there, but we're not sure what's holding us back. What would you say to us today if we're in that transitional moment, regardless if we're not a Christian yet, or if we are and we're new, or if we've done this a long time and we just feel like we just need to go to that next level? What would you say to us?
Try it. That's all I tell you. If you have never tried either getting involved in coming to church, if you just come on the Sunday for that hour, you're going to get a lot, but you're not going to get all of it. You're just going to get a little piece of it. Try serving. Try small groups. If you don't like it, don't go back. Yeah. But try it. That's my biggest thing.
It's awesome.
For me, it's just don't let fear and anxiety control what you do. It controlled me for a long time, and it still does today. But getting out of my comfort zone, I know that God has me and loves me, and I don't have to be perfect for Him to love me. And I know that now.
That's awesome.
Just remember that.
That's awesome. Jen, what would you say?
I would say to give yourself grace in the process, because it says His mercies are new every morning, and so He's got all the grace in the world for us, but it's hard to give it to yourself. But I'll know that you're human, and from 80 years down into your journey, you're still going to be failing, and so allow yourself to do that, but get back up and grow. He loves you enough to take you just as you are, but He loves you enough to not leave you there, so He's going to keep growing with Him. So just give yourself grace in that process.
That's awesome. Can we give it a hand? Come on, can we give it up for them? It's good. Here's what I want us to do. I want to ask you to just bow your head, close your eyes for a moment. I want to pray for us today. And if you're our guest, we're not going to do anything weird or anything funny, but here's my heart for us today, and here's our hope. As we just sat around the table and we just heard real life stories of everything that we talk about week to week here at Cultivate Church. And we talk about these things and we learn biblically through what the Bible says, and there are series, but this is a good opportunity just to stop and pause and to see real people living this out. And the Bible tells us in Romans chapter 10, verse 9 and 13, it says, if you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. It's the greatest news ever given, that anybody who would call on the name of the Lord can be saved. And so just the same that God's done for Mike and Wanda, the same that God has done for Jen, is the same that God can do for us. And so it may be that we're in here and we've never one time said yes to Jesus. And you're the only one that knows the real barriers as to why. But today, maybe you're just reminded that you just need to take that step. You don't have to be perfect. God will perfect us every day. It's a daily process. But maybe you need to make that decision today. And I encourage you on that Connect card, if you'll check it and say, today's my day. I'm giving my heart to Jesus. And I would love for you to do that, because we'd love to send you a letter in the mail, tell you how to take some next steps in that decision. And we'd love to pray for you in that decision. And then maybe you're here today and you've been following Jesus for a long time, but you just feel like you've kind of hit that barrier. Or maybe for you, following Jesus has been, like Mike and Wanda explained, it's been checking off that box. Or maybe your eyes have been on everything, like a season in Jen's life, except for just falling in love with Jesus. And today, maybe you just need to go back to the Lord and say, God, I just want to love you again. And I want you to help me, search my heart, take me to that next level. And so, Father, today I pray for all of my friends in this room and by the internet. And God, above all, I thank you for Jesus. Thank you for salvation that's available to us. Today, we just confess sin. We got stuff in our life, and we need to turn from our sinful way and begin to follow Jesus. And Jesus, we know that because of you, there's forgiveness of our sins, and we ask for it, and we so thankfully receive it today. And Father, I pray for any person that's in here, and maybe there's a barrier. It's fear, worry, anxiety, it's pressure, it's stress, it's whatever it may be that's holding us back from all that you have. I pray that today you just help us to overcome. We commit ourselves fresh to you today, leaving this place differently than we came in. In Jesus' name, amen. Come on, can we honor the Lord together? Can we do that?